Greetings, YouTube friends. Today is Monday, March 16th, 2026, and I am very excited to be joined by Kate from Profit with Planets. We're going to discuss the equinox and the Mercury retrograde and direct station, which happens on the same day as the equinox. Welcome, Kate.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing your outlook on these upcoming events and the markets. So I was thinking that I could screen share some charts. Do you have some charts to screen share?
Well, I thought that maybe if you want to sort of control it and then I'd get you to, because it gets a bit messy, I think, sometimes when lots of people try and put up different charts. So
Agreed. Perfect. All right. I'll just go ahead and screen share. Let's kick it off with the Mercury retrograde cycle.
Fun one.
Okay. So this was the Mercury retrograde station on February 26th that happened overnight. And I always position my charts over New York City, and that could be a slight difference for where you position your charts because
I do the same just for the sake of trading.
you do. Okay.
As a default, it makes it a lot easier. So because I'm doing a lot of company charts, so they're always based in New York. So
perfect. Okay, so I've got the direct or the retrograde station, and then so that was on the 26th of 2026. And now here we are approaching the direct station, which is going to be on March 20th of 26, just within a few hours of the equinox. And Mercury has been in its fall in Pisces during this retrograde period, which I have felt just on a personal level, a lot more than I usually actually feel Mercury retrograde events. How about you, Kate?
Look, this one, I think this patch of astrology here, it's a really tricky one because we had so many things all happen within a really, really tight window of that Mercury retrograde. We had Mars going over the degree of the eclipse, which is a really, really big trigger. Then, of course, those two eclipses, not of course, some may not know, those two eclipses, the way that they happened, formed the Puetz crash window. So we also had that. My experience with Pisces energy for the markets, I've written quite a lot of articles. It's not great for markets, sort of, I guess, because a lot of these Mercury retrogrades, they do often take on the characteristic of the sign. Pisces gets in a little bit of a mess, and I feel that like people get a bit excited. You often see a bit of gambling energy in Pisces, and then the Pisces energy in itself can really cause a few upsets on the market. It's sort of like a little bit there's almost like a bit, you always see things fall apart a little bit from over enthusiasm in a way. So that Pisces energy is really, really messy. Like the Pisces eclipses tend to do a bit of a mess too. So we had so much going on all at once. And then, as you say, now we're coming into the other end where we're going to come into an equinox, which is a turn date of sorts. So this one is, and then of course we had the Neptune-Saturn conjunction as well, all really, really close. Yeah. And I even saw people on Twitter, and I'm not saying this is wrong, but a lot of people are like, oh my God, I cannot wait for this Mercury retrograde to be over. This one's been the worst. How do we know what is what in a way? Because the Neptune-Saturn conjunction is so rare. How do we know what's Mercury retrograde, and how do we know it? Or even with Neptune moving to Aries, this could be 35 years of this totally different energy, which is really quite frightening in a way when you think. So this is a really tough one to separate. Obviously with the markets, but then in general anyway, because obviously the Neptune and Aries cycle, we've seen all the lies come out. I even saw today Banksy, the artist, got revealed. That's something that's been hidden for how long? And, so all these things are going on. So it's a really different one, definitely. So
yeah, one of the things that I was, from my perspective, thinking about with that Saturn-Neptune conjunction is that we have that like long running cycle happening in the background. And now we're getting all of the personal planets triggering that event. So it's kind of like it almost manifests it down into our acute reality in the shorter term cycles, while it's also continuously running in the background as well.
With a Jupiter station in it as well. But, I guess, financial astrology, there's a bit of an order of importance that has to get followed. This is from a market perspective. The less something happens, the more important it is. And, how often does a Puetz window happen? How often does Neptune moving into Aries happen? How often does a Saturn-Neptune conjunction happen? But at the same time, Mercury retrograde seems to be that one transit that it does kind of work like clockwork at the same time. So there's a weird adjustment to the rule, even though it sort of doesn't fall in the order of importance. A really, really tricky one. I did notice with this one, usually, and this is Ray Merriman's work, I just want to point that out, that at the halfway point of Mercury retrograde, often you see the markets will turn around. And there's a saying from all the old financial astrologers that markets will end up often back where they started. Well, that we don't know yet because it hasn't happened, but it's unlikely for that to happen, probably because we have these really high order of importance transits going on. So it's a very tricky one to do any forecast. I mean, it's very hard to forecast in Mercury retrograde anyway, but this one is just extra hard. So,
I made an observation, and because what you were talking about is the cycles and the more frequently they happen versus the longer running cycles that don't happen as often. And I was really digging into the higher time frame cycles of Mercury and Mercury retrograde. And I track something called the Apparition cycles, which is where the planets are going to appear in the sky at roughly the same degree on the same calendar day as they did however many years ago. And that cycle is different for every planet. Mercury, because of the eccentricity of its orbit, has one of the longest running cycles, even though it's got one of the shortest orbits. So there's roughly a 46 to 47 year apparition cycle on Mercury. And that gives us a throwback to 1980. And I was doing some research. This all kind of emerged for me when I was looking at silver, because we had that big blow off top in silver back in January. And I realized that Mercury is inside its apparition cycle from 1980. And so I went back and took a look at, hold on, these are just the Mercury, all the Mercury retrograde stations back to 1900. I actually looked at all of them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but this one, yeah, no, it's a lot. This one took place. This is the February 1980. Our retrograde station was on February 25th, within 1 day of when it was at 21 degrees, 30 minutes Pisces. We're within 1 degree roughly of where we were when we stationed in 2026. And we're inside the Mercury apparition cycle is 46 to 47 years. But because of that extreme eccentricity of Mercury's orbit, it's not even regularly like exactly every 46 years or exactly every 47 years. Kind of like the Venus cycle has like a very reliable 8-year apparition cycle because its orbit is so circular, right? So what I noticed is that then these Mercury retrograde cycles run in, as you know, but sharing with the viewers, they run in sets of elemental signs. And so we're in a set of water signs, Mercury retrograde and water signs. And this is our first one that we just started right now in Pisces. And they come in their sets of 4, 5, or 6. And so I noticed that when they come in sets of 6, they're especially pronounced in the financial markets. And I also then did this other, all these alerts on TradingView. I also did another really fascinating exercise with the Dow Jones. And I took all of these Mercury retrograde events in the water signs and I placed them on the chart. And there is a very, very distinct correlation to Mercury transiting the water sign or Mercury retrograde cycles in the transit signs. Mercury retrograde in the water signs. And major market volatility or crashes. And I use the term crash, lightly but not so lightly here. We had Mercury retrograde in water signs during the 2020 crash. Now here was Mercury transiting the water signs. This was in the 2013, 2014. And this was just generally held an uptrend. We did see periods of volatility. This is a weekly chart here. But it did hold the uptrend. There were 4 retrogrades there. And then, of course, we have a correlation to the 2007 top where we had 4 and they were leading up to the 2007 top, which is very interesting because we also have some other cyclical 2007 patterns. And then lo and behold, the top of 2000 as well. We had Mercury retrograde in water signs. And then now is where it starts to get really interesting because the last time we had 6 events was in 93 and 94. Also inside of an uptrend, but not without some pretty strong volatility midway through the water sign cycle. And then the next one, the 1987 crash, quite literally.
The Scorpio is interesting. I'm not a fan of the Scorpio one at the end of the year. But most people that know my work know I dislike Scorpio energy for the markets a lot. So absolutely. Look at that. That's interesting looking at that big one there. I think that's what the end of the year is going to look like. With the Venus retrograde as well. It's almost like a... Ugh.
I agree with you. Yeah. That I totally agree with you. I think we're in store for some big issues at the end of the year. Down moves most likely. And then here's the 1980, which is the Apparition cycle. And so this is fascinating because here we are in 1980, we stationed retrograde within 1 day and within 1 degree of the exact station of where we are in 2026 right now. And so we saw,
look at that. That's interesting.
Fascinating. And so we saw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks down off of that. And look, the low came in the week after Mercury station direct. So I thought that was preting interesting.
And another thing that's going on at the moment too, we just had the solar eclipse in Aquarius, and the historical thing for those fixed signs eclipses are that they keep the market down for about 3 months. So how do you know? How do we know what is going on at the moment? It's really tricky. And the thing is, when you put it all together, that's how you're able to do the forecasting, because it's like, well, we know that those eclipses are down 3 months. We know that that's a Puetz window. We know we're in this crazy volatile. So it just, it's like a confluence of events, and it takes, 3 or more things that happen in financial astrology. We can make a pretty good, analysis that we think something, which is like a science experiment, I guess. So there is, again, it's loaded at the moment. And I also believe air signs, I think it's again Ray Merriman's work. Apparently air is really bad for the markets too. But when I've seen Sagittarius, I love Sagittarius energy for the markets ruled by Jupiter. The markets love Sagittarius. Even the announcement of Donald Trump was right when the moon went into Sagittarius the other week, and suddenly the markets ran up. Those are really good. So it's important as well. So I agree with you completely. That's elemental. And it's really strange because I'm doing this for a while now, and in the years that I've been doing it, it wasn't that every single Mercury retrograde would just pull the markets back, but you could almost set your watch. And maybe that is what you're saying with these signs that we happen to be in the water series, because I think for the last 5 years, every single, going to COVID era, so about 5, 6 years, every Mercury retrograde has pulled back the markets. And I don't know whether that's because there's more retail in, and of course, Mercury does affect trading and the trader. Whether that is because of more retail, there might be a really interesting element to that as well, because obviously all the moving parts with platforms, I don't know, but it's definitely happening more than it used to, that it's like clockwork that the markets are coming back. So actually those fiery ones will be an interesting test when it's time for them to come along, I think, if there's anyone left.
It is interesting to take a look at the elemental nature of these transits, because the 1929 crash occurred during Mercury retrograde in air signs, which is
there you go. And there was also a really big midpoint. I think it was Saturn between Uranus, Pluto. And that actually was 2 weeks ago as well. There was the Neptune Saturn was between Uranus, Pluto. So we had a giant midpoint. So it was like 6 things going on the other week. And that's when you think, right. Stay away.
There is a lot going on right now. So, the other thing I like to do is I like to put the Mercury station. Oh, that's the retrograde. Let's get the station direct. I like to put the Mercury station and the retrograde, but on the New York Stock Exchange natal chart. And I think that we use the same New York Stock Exchange natal chart. I use the McWhirter 14-degree 7-minute ascendant. I feel like I saw a Twitter post.
I use that for her, just her 14 counts. I tend to use some of either Bill Meridian. Generally, I use their charts just because they're actual traders. So I really but you get the same. You should get the same result. I think with charts, all roads should lead to the same path. It's just user preference. There's no right or wrong. But it is certainly that degree of hers where we were looking at, remember the 14 Cancer, that certainly works. So the chart, I mean, she's a trader too. She's a great trader. So they all work.
Yeah, this is, and of course, right now we've also got, I mean, before we even jump into the direct station, Jupiter's just drilling down at 15 Cancer, which is just right within orb of fixed star Sirius and the ascendant of the New York Stock Exchange.
Yeah, that's her 1 degree away. I noticed that. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. I also did an analysis on that, but on the Dow Jones, and went back and looked at it. And you know what? It's actually not that favorable, because I noticed that, like, I actually think it was Marsilio that first put out on Twitter. He did some research and put it on his tableau that when the moon, or maybe it wasn't him. Well, anyway, when the moon passes over 14 degrees Cancer, you tend to get a big move in the US equity markets.
Yeah, that's interesting because of obviously that angle, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's because of the angle. And I mean, I've tracked it and it is very reliable. And then same, we had Mars go over that not long ago, I think maybe last year. And again, tracked it, big moves and not so favorable, but very volatile. But I went and put Jupiter transiting 15 Cancer, and that's a little bit harder to chart because it's like more like an orb, right? Because Jupiter moves so slowly. But it's not
also your halfway point, which is really important when a planet gets to the halfway point of a sign as well.
It is. And you know what, since we're talking about it, even though this wasn't the prime topic of the video, I will go ahead and pop it up here and and share it, because we can't talk about it and not share it. Okay, so if we go back and take a look at these Jupiters transiting 15 Cancer, it's really whenever we get this second pass, if it's a retrograde session, like this was back in 2013-14, which is also interesting because this is also an echo to the water sign cycle that we were looking at, the Mercury retrograde and water sign, when you talk about like layering the cycles on top of cycles. But we typically get at least 2 to 4 weeks and sometimes much more of a downside move. Here's 3 passes. And this was back in 2002. And we saw a huge down move afterwards. They're not all like that. A lot of them are just these more shorter term consolidation periods, kind of like we saw in 13-14. But that brings us back to where we're at right now. And we're kind of layering the cycles on top of each other, right? And we have Jupiter drilling down at 15 Cancer. It just stationed direct last week there. And so here we are in the middle of this, 1, 2, 3, 4, we're on the 5th week of our down move here, so I think that's pretty fitting. And we're coming down into the equinox, which brings me a little bit off of our, we're on the tangent of the equinox, but I'm skipping off of Mercury retrograde for a minute. Of course, it's GAN originally that identified the seasonal changes correlated to the equinox. But I went back and charted that on the indexes, and it is a very strong turn point in the US equity indexes. So the fact
I've seen it, the one in June from my experience is, look, I've seen it work and not work. I remember when I was trading on Wall Street, this is many years ago, probably 2011. I remember oil, funnily enough, at the bottom, it's not like like COVID when it went to negative, but I remember the bottom fell out of oil so badly right to the date, and the whole markets fell apart. So sometimes you see a really, really strong thing, and then sometimes you don't. It's interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure. Again, I haven't really done the stats of it, but I just remember just trading through it. And sometimes I get all worked up for it and nothing happens. I don't do GAN, so there's probably something to that maybe some have more effect and some don't. But I mean, I've seen some serious turns before. So, and then I've just seen nothing happen.
Get this to load up. If I can get this to load up real quick, I will. It definitely does. I mean, nothing works 100% of the time. I think in the markets, that's absolutely true. But let me
and again, it probably is when you've got a confluence of other transits going on. So how do we know? We don't know that this move today, because obviously it's been such a strong bounce. Who knows, how it.
Yeah. Well, so here we go. So this is just these are planetary lines, right? And this is just a way to visualize the equinoxes. And this is The solstices, we would use a different set of lines, or you can look at the midpoint too, right? For the solstices. But the equinox, being the tropical new year, right? Which is the spring equinox in the northern hemisphere, or the March equinox. So last year we had 2 weeks after the equinox was our major reversal there on the Dow. And then I live out in the country, so sometimes my things load a little bit slow. Here we had another turn here and these are weekly pivots that I'm talking about. Because this was obviously a weekly pivot down for a few weeks, but then we actually, what is that? Like 3 weeks afterwards, put in a major cycle low before I move up. Right. So nothing trades like in a vacuum. You can't just say this is going to be a turning point for like a quarter guaranteed, but as far as like weekly turns, I find it to be pretty darn reliable. Plus or minus 1 week. Look at that one. That one was really incredible actually for the whole quarter then,
Well, this one's kind of interesting. I thought about the other day, I thought, oh, we're in Mercury retrograde in Pisces, and Pisces rules oil, and look at the volatility in oil. So
true.
Maybe it does form, some part of, because obviously the oil and the markets are trading very inverse to each other. So maybe that story does come in, but some way, look, how do you know? It's kind of guessing stuff. Unfortunately, it's hindsight kind of stuff, but it'll be really interesting to see what happens.
I totally agree. Yeah, that I do think that it would make sense for us to and then we can also talk about traditional time cycles too, which is what I use that in my work as well. I use Hirsch cycles, and we're due for a 20-week and a 40-week cycle low in the US equity indexes. So
they're great. I sometimes will go and check the Hirsch cycles to back up, but if I'm just just a bit of Confluence or just the confirmation bias, sometimes I'll pull a Hirsch cycle if I'm just feeling a little bit like conflicted.
Yeah, good. They're super useful. So, and that's where like we're back to like when you're actually trading the markets, it's that confluence that we're looking for, right?
Exactly.
Like the lining up of not just the planetary cycles, but also the Hirsch cycles and the technical analysis. And
there's a guy, his name, forgetting it, Randall Ashbourne. He's passed away now. He was a really early financial astrologer. And he would always say technicals over astrology always. I think, and that's one thing that people are looking to get into financial astrology. You do have to have a technical element, because I call it the 1% financial astrology. 99% of people, and especially when you've got commercial traders and things, then they're not looking at astrology. The 99% are looking at the technicals. So it's really important to put that technical element there. It's the magic. The magic is where it meets together. And that's where the money happens, when you can get that beautiful balance of both. But, if you get one saying one thing, one saying another thing, you don't take the trade, definitely.
100%. That's the sweet spot. I mean, that's
exactly
what I found.
It's where the magic happens.
It is where the master, it's what I call the astro edge. Cool. Okay. Well, do you want to talk about the Mercury Direct chart, or do you want to talk about the Equinox chart first? Let's
talk about the Mercury chart first.
Okay.
I think this one will be interesting with crypto, with the shadow as well, because obviously you've got this shadow phase. And my experience is the shadow phase can kind of go on a little bit, like with, the sort of don't buy new purchases during Mercury retrograde. Usually by the end of the second one, I'm going to go back to trading. And they sort of say that the second shadow is not as bad as the first. But I think this one's going to be a little bit interesting for crypto. I don't know. It's hasn't got some good. You might have seen it in the Hirsch cycles. I know they're not amazing for crypto that are coming up, and there's some IPO stuff. So it's interesting that it's making these highs, and so that's one thing, particularly crypto. Like I say, the more something, the less something happens, the more important it is. Well, crypto really bunks that theory, because for me, that is the strongest transit for using financial astrology and crypto. I think if anything, you could almost just use Mercury retrograde and do pretty well out of it. But I think it's like 8 years running where it has not reacted to the shadow. It seems to do well through the Mercury retrograde, and then it just something often comes along. So it is a really important transit.
That's fascinating, because on Bitcoin, I have two kind of primary thesis right now. One is, both of them contend that the low is in, at least for now, maybe until later this year. But one is a retest of the lows. And then the other one is, just maybe a slow and steady grind up. Not
I don't know
to
the
make
answer,
new
but
all.
that's why I'm just watching this one thinking, ooh, okay. But I mean, 8 years is a pretty solid set of statistics.
It is.
So
Yeah, that
I don't think I've seen anything in the market it's got such a good track, not a good track record, but that has reacted so much to something. So it's really important, the station as well, just for that.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's an excellent piece of information to track on the charts, because I haven't actually been consistently tracking the Mercury retrograde shadow period on Bitcoin. So I'll keep an eye on
I
that.
look at my Twitter posts. I'll go into Twitter and put Mercury retrograde shadows up, and that I can just see it through my own old timestamps and stuff. It's really
Oh, that's
interesting.
cool.
So it's good to have
That's
my
a good
phone.
way to
So
keep track of your work
yeah,
too. I love that.
I do all the lines of my charts and then I undo them and then they've all gone. And I've got to be a bit better with that actually.
Well, yeah, and I wonder, I actually let's put the hold on, let me pull this up here real quick. Let's put the Mercury direct moment on the Bitcoin chart. I didn't.
And just to say, generally, the second shadow has always been the worst from my experiences. I've been watching it for like 10, 12 years. It's always the post shadow, which tends to do not always, but more often than not.
Let's see. Here we go. So here's the Bitcoin natal chart on the inner wheel. And I use the January 3rd, 2009
I
Genesis.
don't use that one.
Oh, you don't use
I'm
that
not a
one?
fan of it.
Okay.
No, I've got my own chart, but so.
Okay.
But
Okay.
again,
Well,
it's just whatever works. It's preference choice, and all roads should lead to the same path. It shouldn't matter. So
yep. I got them on here. Let's see. It says, oh my gosh, are we having a total Mercury retrograde moment? Because it says that the Bitcoin chart is on the inner wheel, but I think they're flipped around. No.
oh, I can see the Jupiter at Cancer on the
There we
outside.
go. There we go. Because what I'm looking at here, I don't know why I keep having these moments here, Mercury retrograde moments, because the Mercury
You're
direct
allowed
chart,
to have them. It's normal. There's something wrong if you don't have them in Mercury retrograde.
the Mercury direct chart has the thing that really stood out to me is it's Mercury conjunct the North Node. They're at 8 degrees of Pisces, right? So then I pull the Bitcoin chart, and here we've got the Genesis block. It says it's on the inner wheel, but it's not. It's flipped. Do you see that? This is we're having a Mercury retrograde moment, because here's the let's just refresh it. Well, anyway, I'll get that going while if you want to share the rest of what was standing out to you about this Mercury direct chart.
Well, it's actually because the chart I use has got Saturn coming over the midheaven, and look, it's a Bill Meridian thing that often you will see people sell. It doesn't look like that though with the strength. I mean, it's a total experimental transit, but I see many assets sell off when Saturn crosses. It's like the point of public interest in something. So when you get Saturn up there, so it's just really that I'm looking at, that timing. And with Uranus, the other thing, we've got Uranus at 29 degrees of Taurus coming. Like that is, all bets are off. Like you have to just see what's going to happen with that. So it's all timing very, very close. It's in 3 weeks and we're in the shadow through that as well. We don't know what that's going to be about. It could be anything. You know, so much news. You've got so much banking news coming. So it could be banking. I think it'll have something to do with Taurus money, but of course that does rule Uranus, Taurus is crypto. So we just don't know. It's a wild card transit as far as I'm concerned. So
Yeah,
that makes this one tricky to be in the shadow at the same time.
It does. And the thing that stands out to me with Mercury being conjunct the North Node, that means it's opposite the South Node. And the South Node is really tightly orbed to the part of fortune. And I use the part of fortune a lot, specifically in financial astrology, but in all of my charts. And so the fact that we've got that direct station opposite to the part of fortune over New York City doesn't bode well for the shadow period for me. Right there, as maybe we see some more, a little bit more selling, because also the 7th house is the house of sellers. So
yeah, I'm going to wait this one out. Whenever there's a shadow in, there's my Mercury retrograde. Whenever there's a shadow in energy like this, I just stay out. But I mean, I've got so much discipline that I never used to have anymore. So SPY's still expensive to me. I'm still waiting for a better pullback to kind of go shopping, I think. But yeah, this one is screaming, do not act. I think really, or act with caution if you're going to.
Caution. I mean, to me, what I think is that I definitely think sellers will get activated at least over a period of a few days afterwards. And I like what you're saying, probably during the shadow period. Let's take a look at the equinox chart too.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I'm staying out of Uranus 29 Taurus only because I got caught in the Fukushima and lost like a couple of $100,000 in 5 minutes on uranium stock. So I'm forever traumatized.
Oh,
it was not a good day.
That was not a good day. Oh my gosh.
It was very early in my trading. Actually, just when I got into first, how I found financial astrology. It's like an anniversary when I think about it. But any trader that's had that happen will just, yeah, you know.
Was that event before or after you were using financial astrology?
Oh, before. That's the thing that led me into it. That was
wow. Okay.
that was the tipping point.
Wow, that's amazing.
If only I knew, yeah, and that was really interesting because you know, even oil has reacted a lot to Uranus 29 Taurus. It's done crazy $100 moves and stuff. So again, we don't know what's what at the moment, but probably I'll be so prepared for this one, nothing will happen. I doubt it, but you never know. I think Mercury likes to trick. The more prepared you are, the less something goes on.
Okay, so here's the equinox chart, and you know what's interesting is that Mercury's still retrograde on the equinox, right? Right as the sun makes its ingress to Aries, right? Because that's how we kind of define the equinox chart, basically, as the sun's ingress to Aries. The other piece of it, just for people who are a little bit more technical into it, is that it's also the sun as it approaches 0 degrees declination too. But as far as the longitudinal chart, we use the sun ingress Aries. And so then I like to just see what are the prime aspects going on to the sun. And of course, the number one thing that stands out is that the sun is approaching a conjunction. It's very tightly orbed to Neptune and then Saturn.
And I wonder what that means. That's a bit interesting, isn't it?
Well,
will come out then, some Epstein-y stuff, maybe.
I think of it, this is kind of what I was like saying about, like, I feel like we're getting the acute manifestation of the Saturn-Neptune cycle right now. So it's almost like, you know, because let's see, we've had all of these inner planets, you know, first we have Venus over the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. We're going to have the sun, then we're going to have the Mars and Mercury. And so it's like, we're just going to kind of get this, I feel like, Saturn Neptunian experience in the realm of the inner planets. So that's kind of, and so then Gann always used the spring equinox chart, the equinoxes and the solstices to forecast the quarter. So that's kind of how I look at it, as like this kind of gives us a running theme for the next 3 months.
And he actually, some of the old financial astrologers used to make a chart for DC. So they would take the 0 Aries chart, and then they would be able to work out what the government and what would happen in the US based on the Washington DC chart. You're actually supposed to do like geography astrology. You are actually supposed to set a chart for 0 degrees of Aries, like an equinox chart, to even start doing astrology. That's why I don't do many countries, because I don't do that. So I feel like I'm cheating a little bit if I don't do that. But that's how they used to do it back in the day, definitely.
Yeah, and I mean, we could make an argument too for this, since this is the tropical New Year, that this is also Yeah, so it's not just the quarter, it's for the whole.
You know, that's to see like policy implementation and everything, like education and excuse me. Yeah. This is the Mercury retrograde. Okay.
Yeah, so it also stands out, I think, that, you know, it's a pretty wide orb, but the part of fortune it's a wide orb square to the equinox. You know, it's 8-degree orb, and that's a little wider than I would like to use, but it's notable. But it's also, interestingly, very tightly orbed, 7 degrees to Jupiter. Right. And so it's like, you've kind of got some different angles that you can look at there, because then you've also got Jupiter trine Mars. And so that's interesting. What is this?
That's a good transit for the war stuff, isn't it, in a way?
Yeah, I definitely would say. And it's in the 9th house, Mars and Pisces in the 9th, you know.
That's interesting.
So 9th house being international trade or international relations, right? So that is certainly very interesting to see how that is placed. And I've been tracking this asteroid Hygiea because I've been finding that healthcare is actually affected by that. Well, or there's a correlation. I don't know if I'll say affected by. I'll say there's a correlation between asteroid Hygiea prominent aspects and XLV is the sector I kind of use just as a barometer. And a lot of my work actually with that is in the heliocentric charts because I use both. So I'm not going to bridge into that today, but it is notable to me that we have the equinox sun is square with a 4-degree orb to asteroid Hygiea, and asteroid Hygiea is the asteroid of health and wellness. Yeah. So yeah, I know that's kind of uncomfortable, right? Yeah. Particularly after all of the events of 2020. So that definitely stands out to me. So we've got the Mercury just about to be direct, conjunct the North Node in orb of Mars there. And look at that. That is very interesting that the Mercury North Node is trine to the part of fortune there in the first house. So, this could be really kind of giving us clues as to different sectors to look at. I'm personally of the opinion that I don't think we're going to get kind of an all-out market crash until later. Like,
well, with all the Louise McWhirter stuff is like literally a couple of months. Again, I think Uranus 29 Taurus has to pass first, but obviously you're already at 8, so we know those nodes are about to change any minute. Then you'll have Jupiter and Leo coming, and then you're going to have Uranus between the nodes, and then you're going to have the Jupiter-Pluto opposition. Pluto's retrograde, that's the only saving grace. Is that Pluto's not at full strength. But again, it's that thing when we've got 3 huge transit, what is going to take precedence or what's going to create the strongest? And, that's the thing when you've got 3 things going on, that's that confluence science experiment. Yeah. So how do we know? Personally, I'm just not doing anything to that. I mean, I would not do anything. I'll trade around a little bit, but personally, it's just preparation. I'll just wait for that to pass and see what comes.
Well, there's nothing wrong with sitting out for sure.
I get really bored, but that's the best trades. And for like almost not trading is sometimes makes the most money. I think this year particularly.
Yeah,
I don't really know how this one's going to play out. And then, of course, you've got that crazy the astrology we talked about earlier with the Mercury retrograde in Scorpio and the Venus retrograde, and it just feels like I really, speaking of Mercury retrograde, I feel you could use the calendar for Mercury retrograde for trading this year. I said that in my 2026 forecast. Use the calendar because it just happens to be timed, and interestingly, it's Mercury retrograde in the June-July Louise McWhirter transits as well in your water, obviously in Cancer. So there you go. So it's so weird that all these Mercury retrogrades are coming amongst all this other strong market astrology.
Yeah, it is. I agree. And you're totally right to name that the Venus retrograde.
Scorpio
also it's on October 3rd. And so if we kind of go back here and look at when we're going to get that, let's see.
Which is not far after the Equinox, which is interesting as well. You're going to have your September 21 days.
That is interesting.
And then I think Pluto goes direct within days of that. And what happens from my experience is that, and this is kind of my own work, if Pluto doesn't let a market crash, when it wakes up, and there's Ray Merriman's got a stat as well within, I don't want to take his work and use it, but there's within X amount of days, the market does tend to tumble within X amount of days of Pluto going direct as well. So that's another thing going on then. So again, depending on how it's going to work earlier with Pluto retrograde, the station is really, really strong of Pluto. So it's a hot spot of stuff.
Yeah, I'm looking at how close this is right now. Hold on. So let's pop that on there.
It's a trading market, unless you get really good. I mean, I like individual equities, so it's good for me. I'm not really a big index trader anymore. I've done it. So if you get a really great level, perfect. But there's some gaps in a lot of charts, and my feeling are those gaps are going to get filled this year. So I think it's just a wait at different gaps and just don't put all the eggs in one basket and just have a sort of engine strategy with it.
I totally agree. Yeah. I that was part of my forecast for 2018 as well, is that this is a traders, or not 2018, 2026, that this is a traders market, and that the price patterns actually echo the 8-year Venus cycle, harkening kind of back to 2018. Uh,
That's what I
and
don't know
so,
about. Yeah.
yeah, but look at that. That's the Venus retrograde in Scorpio and the Mercury
Ooh,
retrograde
in
in
history?
Scorpio.
Or
Huh?
oh, they're the lines there. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
No,
put
they're together. There you go. Yeah, this Mercury retrograde is well poised, this next one, you know.
yeah, that is poised for some severe market behavior.
And then look at the one in
Extreme
June
market
is
behavior.
right near your solstice date.
Yep, it is. Yeah, look at that.
So these are when I was the calendar I use has got the sort of red spots of the volatility days. So it's quite a good one. I like to, it's just easy. I like things that are very easy. And so every time I would look at it, I'd be like, oh, there's that transit, all around those really high volatility days around the stations, particularly, you know. So which makes it
Yeah,
good for people that want to just get into financial astrology. Start with the Mercury retrograde. I always say, all people I teach, because I teach, start with Mercury retrograde, start using the rules, start using the discipline. The amount of people that don't, and it was me for probably 7 or 8 years. I just couldn't use the discipline to trade differently or not trade through Mercury retrograde. And it just bit me so many times, particularly with equities. There's always one that you buy in Mercury retrograde that some stupid story happens and it sits in your folio to remind you. Because the rule is don't, but you know, something always. I mean, once I remember I bought some tuna shares and the water got poisoned and all the fish died.
oh
It's a Mercury retrograde, it's an Australian stock. It's a funny story, but like the really silly stuff will happen with equities like that. You know, so
that's amazing.
it
Wow.
is funny. It is very funny.
Yeah, that's incredible. So if we stick this on the New York Stock Exchange natal chart, the sun is always going to fall within 2 degrees of the New York Stock Exchange natal south node on the equinox, because that's just the position of the New York Stock Exchange natal south node, right? It's interesting, though, that of course we've got this whole activation with Saturn and Neptune and the sun all there in the ninth house. And then we've also, this is very notable. Uranus is obviously, it's off right now, but it's just made its last pass over the New York Stock Exchange natal sun. That's kind of been,
Yes, yeah. And that's when you've seen all the 24/7 trading coming in and all the tokenized like change. Because whenever you've got Uranus on the sun, it's on an IPO sun, it's about change.
mm,
And there's no coincidence to me that all that the way that we used to trade is totally different now.
yeah, it's totally transforming. I know
Mhm.
it's really quite brilliant.
Mm.
And I think so. I've been incorporating a few of the fixed stars lately, and we are headed towards this conjunction with fixed star Alcyone. And that is the fixed star correlated to sight and blindness, basically.
Oh,
And so, I
what is
keep
it?
thinking
So
that,
how do you interpret that? That's really interesting.
well, I think when Uranus gets there, I think that there's something that we're not seeing that's going to really surprise us.
Oh,
That
I see what you mean. Right.
Yeah. So it's like,
Well,
we'll see.
yeah, because it's got to get through 29 Taurus and
Yeah, it
get to
does.
Gemini.
Yeah. Yep. And the fact that it's sitting right there at 0 Gemini, I think, yeah, we
Right.
won't even know what we're in for, you know?
Yeah.
But that's certainly notable there. And then of course, we talked about Jupiter sitting on the ascendant. Something else I like to take a look at is the gold fix chart. Do you use the gold fix chart at all?
Not so much. I think it's one of Bill Meridian's charts that I use, but again, they all should lead to the same place.
Well, what really kind of jumped out at me about so the gold fix chart, for the listeners who are new or who don't know, it was the first time that the gold was fixed in London by a group of bankers, and it's the date and time and location is listed on the Rothschild website. So for astrology purposes, it's really easy to get a very precise chart. And I find I kind of treat it almost like the mother gold chart. I have charts that, there's many charts you can use for any asset. But I find that this one is very powerful and works extremely well. And this is a really big deal. From my take anyway, is that we've had Saturn and Neptune closely approaching natal Chiron on the natal gold chart. And then we've also simultaneously got Uranus just passed over the south node of the natal gold fix chart. So the natal gold fix nodes are sitting at 27 Scorpio Taurus. And so, you know, I think, yeah, not surprising that we saw that massive blow off top.
Yeah.
You know, and it will be interesting to see because Saturn is about to get exactly to the degree here within the next few week or so after the equinox of that natal Chiron. So
and Uranus must have passed over the 27 probably right when the big manipulation happened. Would that be like a couple of weeks ago? That would have been
it would have been. Yeah. Let's see.
Chaos.
Well, yeah. Very interesting. Yep. Super interesting. All right. Well,
a lot of rabbit holes there.
There's so many. I know it's very, very interesting exploration. It's both an academic exploration and then it's also an actionable trading exploration. So it just kind of
passion and hobby, I think half the time, isn't it really? It's so have you got a thought, I guess, for this station Mercury Direct? Do you think there'll be the reversal of or the end of things or?
Well, my overall outlook right now is that my number one scenario is that I think we're going to find a 20-week, 40-week cycle low, weekly pivot low, and then potentially run up to new all-time highs into the summer. But we have to see if that does happen. That's a blow off top in a scenario, in my opinion. So of course, once that low is in, then I'm gauging the momentum.
I've seen a couple of Hearst people mention that. I know the Hearst stuff is pointing to that. I don't know. Like a Jupiter in Cancer is a topping Jupiter cycle. You know, which part does it go? And Jupiter in Leo is change of sector, change of investor sentiment and stuff. But yeah, look, I don't know. It's how do and I think the Puetz window ends this way. I know it's 2 weeks. I can't remember. So is this it was last week?
I've heard of it, but I don't use it. I'm not super familiar with it.
So that's
do you want to tell us
after 2 weeks it tends to sort of start to dry. Look, I don't know, I've seen a few. So what it is, I sort of don't know if I can quote this right. When a lunar eclipse that is also a full moon falls after a solar eclipse, but it has to happen when markets have been at a high with that sort of FOMO investor sentiment. It doesn't work if you've had markets that are already beaten up. That's the key to it. There has to be some sort of blow off situation to set the stage for, and then what happens is that obviously you can get events and stuff, but then it also is about, and I think I put this on social media, that is a big part of it is about the change of investors being of investor sentiment. Everyone's really excited, like buy the dip, buy the dip, buy the dip. And by the end of the window, they're freaked out.
Yeah.
Because you get these really big, long candles. Like the lunar eclipse kind of starts it, and then you might get a couple of little candles that are up, and then it just goes, which is what we saw the other day. I've seen different varying degree charts have different outcomes, but the way investors feel about the markets are a really big part of it as well. So you get the actual event and then the psychology too.
Well, that's very interesting. I mean, for me, I like from a technical standpoint here, I've got the NASDAQ chart here, which is kind of what interests me the most. Let's turn off some of these extra things. So the NASDAQ chart, I feel like if we lose this low, because this is a weekly squeeze. And so a weekly squeeze, a squeeze on any time frame, if you use, because I studied a little bit with John Carter at Simpler Trading, and his squeeze rules are quite, they're very powerful. They work.
Do you mean like a Bollinger Band squeeze?
Yeah. Well, so it's by definition when the Bollinger Bands set to 2 standard deviation come inside the Keltner's channels set to 2 standard deviation from the mean. And Keltner channels are set to 2 ATR from the mean. They're 2 different measurements. And when that compression happens, it's basically just a really tight range, right? If that whichever way that breaks, you tend to see 6 to 8 weeks of momentum in the direction that it breaks. And so for me, as long as this low of weekly consolidation holds, then that's what kind of drives my thesis of, blow off top into the summer. Because if it breaks bull, then we should get 6 to 8 weeks to the upside on that. Because it's been going sideways for so long. Conversely, though, if it breaks bear, we should also get 6 to 8 weeks to the downside there. But because we're in this window of the 20 to 40 week cycle low due, right? We either hold here this is my top scenarios. And of course I can always be wrong, but we hold here, come up, maybe just make another double top, triple top, or a lower high, right? And then we come down. That's certainly possible. But I feel like to come straight down from here would be, I
guess what's interesting is that what is everyone going to buy? The NASDAQ stocks, but look at the financial news that's coming out. And obviously the financials are what drags probably the Dow down, I presume. The financials are probably in there.
Yeah.
So what happens when we get the Jupiter-Pluto opposition, which will likely bring a lot of banking news? So maybe you're going to get different markets doing different things. I don't know if you've looked at them differently, and of course Uranus in Gemini is NASDAQ-y. The other thing too, and I think we've already seen it, when Uranus moves into a sign, you do tend to see the market that it rules. You think the markets are going to all of a sudden go whatever Uranus is in, and you actually see a pullback of the sign. Like when Uranus went into Taurus, Bitcoin the first year was down. It actually tends to, because Uranus expect the unexpected. I'm not really quite sure on the rule. It's just something I've been looking at lately. So that makes things a little complicated as well. So
it does. One of the other things that I use is analogs that are built on planetary cycles that repeat, right? And they have a very high degree of accuracy, the ones that I use. And these are the two analog variations for the NASDAQ. And they do not forecast price. They only forecast structure and direction.
Really use price. I don't
yeah.
use myself.
Yeah. So they're largely directional, so it looks like we could continue to see some range trading through the end of March. Maybe we either going to retest the high and then fail, or we make another bottom here and then take off. So those are my two base cases, and that's just as far as actionable trading information. That's what I'm keeping an eye on, and I'm trading it through like individual stocks that are fundamentally strong.
Oh, that's what I do as well. That's how I trade anyway, but that's the way to do this one. Like if you get a good price. It's what also is very confusing is that you've got Warren Buffett has sold Amazon and Bank of America.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure.
You've had all this crazy banking news, but so that just adds a weird spin to everything as far as I'm concerned. Like if Warren Buffett says, right, Amazon, because his rule is sort of intelligent investor, buy equities and then you sell them at full or overvalued. So Warren Buffett's saying, I think the bank is overvalued. I think Amazon's overvalued. What happens?
I think he's right, because we're in the late stage of a long-term cycle. So it just kind of depends on your time horizon. Warren Buffett has a enormously long time horizon, and he's been incredibly successful with that. So it makes sense that he would sell everything out and be waiting patient, So
it'd be interesting to see how that is going to go. But I agree. That we're starting to get some charts are offering up like weekly 100% oversold. That's how I buy my stuff. I don't buy anything that's not oversold. It just makes life easier. We're starting to get that at least. So I think out of this Mercury retrograde, there will start to be some good buys. But I think not licensed for financial advice, but I just think make sure people shouldn't put all their powder in everything and just pick what they really like and be prepared to buy that at a few different levels if required.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's only a 5% pullback. It's like nothing,
It's true. Well, in that context, also like looking at that consolidation period, if you look at the NASDAQ, it's consolidating above the 236 retracement. There's nothing bearish about that. There are bearish things going on.
It's barely even made lower lows, so I think you got a hit of the 200-day moving average. That is a normal correction of just something that needs to breathe. It's not even bearish when something touches it. So we haven't even started.
Yeah. Yes, totally agreed. Totally agreed. And for,
It's
you know,
technical at
everybody,
this point.
it's important to define your, like, you know, yeah, not financial advice, but no, if you're a trader or an investor, you need to know what your time horizon is, right? Because I could be talking about buying some lows of a 20 or 40-week cycle, but I might only hold them for a few weeks or a few months, you know? As like my own trading strategy. Conversely, like Warren Buffett's going to buy something and hold it for years. You know?
He's like,
And I have those
grandchildren are going to own that stock. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I have some of those positions too, but just
I can't hold them. I always set out to do that, and then they go into some profit. I'm like, let me take it. I started in a day trading firm, so it's really hard for me. I do think how you start trading sets your behavioral psychology, and it's very hard to undo that. It's based on, I think, what market you come into. I came in literally a financial crisis crash, like Euro financial crisis. So I'm so used to things that going, you know, that's what I started with, that, you know, I've got a bit of a trader mindset. But if I would like on this stick to hold some stuff, but I don't know.
I totally, I also started day trading, not for it, just with my own money in the crypto market in 2017. I learned actually from the chart guys and Dan of the chart guys is just an astounding pure price action trading teacher. They're so good. And I traded I day traded all the way up until a few years ago. And then I started realizing that the longer I held things, the more money I made.
Yeah.
So I just slowly have shifted over time from, you know, first to short-term swing trading and now to, I'd say, medium-term swing trading. And I'm really actually excited for the next market crash whenever it actually comes,
like,
you know, super
absolutely.
stoked.
I mean, people have got to not be scared of it. They've got to think of it as opportunity.
Absolutely.
It'll be an opportunity to not have to sit and stare at a screen, or to buy some stuff and do a bit of life and just let it. I mean, it's great in a way. I mean, it's not great for new people that are new in the market. I don't want to say that, but because it's obviously very scary when you go through your first correction and crash. But it is a good way to reframe it, to not be scared.
Yes.
Because everything is too toppy and too overvalued, and the AI, we don't even know what's going to happen with the AI stuff. You know, Uranus is pretty chaotic. So, and I was saying to someone the other day, $1 trillion valuation. When I was at school, $1 trillion was it was a made up figure that didn't exist. $1 trillion was it was a fictional number, and now things are being valued. It's so weird, you know.
Yeah, it is. Well, you know, I mean,
strange. So
everything is designed to go up over time, right? I mean, that's the nature. Oh, well, this has been
that's a big
awesome.
One, so
yeah, so fun. Thank you for joining me.
Now the markets will turn around and do everything opposite that we said because we did this in Mercury retrograde.
Let's hope not. Let's hope not.
That's the rule.
I'm going to cast that out of the
Luckily, there's 5 other things going on to back up our. Well, thank you very much for having me. It was a really great chat. Good to see the females at it. That's great.
Yes, I love it. Kate, do you want to tell the viewers where they can find you?
Yes, so Profit with the Planets. I have a website. I've written a couple of books. Particularly, my niche is to trade equities. I love it. So I've written a couple of books on how to do the IPO method. I have a Patreon where I also do other market stuff as well. I like to get under the hood and see what's going on, and it tends to work pretty well. So that's for individual equities, and on Twitter under Profit with the Planets as well.
Awesome. And to any new viewers, you can find me on X as well at Margot_Amala. You can also join my Discord through the link in the video description below. And you can find me on my website. I do personalized astrology readings as well at, margotamala.com. And if you found this video useful, give us a like and subscribe. And if you turn on the bell notifications, you won't miss the next video. All right. Have a great day. Bye.